Hi, this is Jerry Ludlow. Today I'm going to be painting St Mary's Church in Munden, Essex. Now, parts of the church have been here since the 12th century, so there's a real feeling of our country's history when painting this structure that's been here for over 1,000 years. And I was wondering how many people have drawn and painted in this wonderful location over them years. Now, I came here recently with my art club to paint plein air, and I wanted to take you through my process to produce a finished painting. First, I found a spot that I liked, which is a few hundred feet away from the back of the church, but I knew that I'd have to trim it, so I did some quick sketches to find the best composition for my painting and what to include. Here's the sketches. They're just small thumbnails, and I liked the first one straight away, so I didn't bother too much with the second one. They didn't take me very long, just probably less than a minute, but I had a good feeling about the first one being right, albeit I was going to make the trees a bit higher on the right hand side. It looked a bit straight. Here is the cropped version, and I really not sure about the foreground. I may make that a bit bigger, but I like the tree line. Really like that, the way that flows. I think that's quite attractive. It's a cloudy day, so I'm going to make it. I want to make it with some sunshine there, so I'll probably put a blue sky in there with some clouds. So that'll be coming in that direction. And there'll be light on these trees. And also I want to bring these trees over the chapel, and there'll be a nice shadow on the chapel off of the trees, and there is a porch to the church which you can't really see that well, but I will be putting a shadow onto that porch and exaggerating the light in the porch there, this area here. Also, there's a gate there which I will be putting in, losing some of these hedges and bringing a path out, which I think will make it a good composition, with the path leading you into the chapel via the gate. And that is the way that I work the composition out. Now, this is my palette, starting from bottom left: sepia, Payne's grey, French ultramarine, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, cobalt turquoise, neutral tint, light red, then raw umber, burnt sienna, raw sienna, quinacridone gold, hooker's green, sap green at the greens, cadmium yellow, alizarin crimson, opera rose, and then cadmium red, jaune brilliant, and lavender. I also use white and white gouache. Now, the paper I'm using is Arches 250 pounds rough. Now, on this occasion, I've done the sketch, I've done the drawing, and now going to start putting the paint on. Now, because this paper is, with the Arches 250 pounds rough, it's very absorbent, so You have to use quite a lot of water with your paints because the texture is quite spongy really. Now I'm using cadmium red, just a little bit of alizarin crimson, and then I'm going to mix up another puddle of some of the cloud colour, neutral tint, as I said, lots of water. And a little bit of sepia, another dark colour. This is really just to get a lightish grey. You have to make it slightly darker when you put the paint on. So it really is a case of practice to get this right. I'm still thinking about the areas. I wanted to put the blue area around the chapel, the church. Working from left to right. And then the actual outline of the church is in the greyer mixture. And then the blue going over to the right of the painting. You can design your skies to, in some ways, emphasize your focal point, which in this case is the church. Taking the colour down through where the trees are. Keeping it more watery as it gets to the lower level. I like to try and get most of the paper covered in a first wash, more or less straight away. I'll clean the palette and then get a foreground wash mixed. Using a dilute mix of raw sienna. I want this first wash to be quite bright, so just a little bit of cadmium yellow, which is quite a strong yellow, so I don't need much of that. and this is going to be the field where the light grasses are. Not fussing too much. I'm just varying it very slightly with some burnt sienna, but not too worried because a lot of this is going to be covered. And for the path, add into that mixture some light green, some sap green. Now I've dried the paper off and back to the painting. I will be stopping the film as I dry off rather than have you watch the hairdryer on the paper. Doing the background trees which surround the church with some alizarin crimson and some Payne's grey and a little cobalt blue. And when these dry, the colour will, being quite a cold colour, will make it recede. I like to wet the edges where it meets the trees so that you don't have a hard edge when you start to put the tree colours in. Just trying to keep it an interesting shape. And now I'm going to be putting in the trees, bearing in mind the light's coming from the left to the right. So a very light wash to the top left of the tree on the right hand side, which is a mixture of quinacridone gold and hooker's green. And add into that mixture some cobalt blue, so I can use various parts of that mixture depending on where the tree is. Now getting a little bit darker, just varying it really. Now with the trees, I'll put on an initial first wash, which will be a variety of colours, leaving some spaces where you'll still be able to see the sky in the background. just adding a variety of colours to this pool of colour that's there. Some hooker's green to the raw sienna, wanting that to be a darker tree to the left of the church, because that's going to be casting the shadow on the wall of the church. Using a variety of brushes, mostly mops and a medium round as well. I find that when I paint foliage, I tend to use the brushes that I've had quite a long time. This particular mop I've had for a lot of years. It's quite worn down, and I quite like it for the broken effect it gives you with when I'm doing the foliage. Putting in what was the hedge there, making it more broken than what the actual hedge there was. Now bringing some nice warm colours as I bring the wash into the foreground. This is burnt sienna. With the foregrounds in my paint, so try not to put too many washes on. It does make it more brighter. When you're painting foregrounds like this where it's very broken, you kind of have to just trust your instinct that when it dries and when you add the other bits and pieces, it will look convincing as grasses. Once again, I've dried this off. Still using quite a large brush, putting in the roof of the porch of the church in light red. And the roof tiles. I decided just to put in two trunks, which when I looked at the photograph there were two visible trunks. One was the taller tree on the right hand side, and I'd left a gap there for the other one. Just putting an initial first wash on these trunks. I will make them a little bit darker on their right hand side later, as the sun's coming from the left to right. Now the what is the back of the church, which has this lovely window with 3 separate panes or 4 separate panes of glass. And when you're inside the church, it looks very attractive. I may well do a an interior one time with the from the interior of the church, because it's pretty much hasn't been messed about with too much in there. It looks very old, which is nice. They've spent a lot of time restoring parts of this in keeping with its age. Very sympathetically, I think you'd call the restoration. Now, using a darker mixture for the shadows in the trees, keeping the edges light where the sun would be hitting it, and then putting in the darks where they would be within the foliage, getting darker as it gets towards the ground. Lots of blue in this darker mixture. And also putting in some light green, some sap green. Putting in some broken greenery here and there. Being mindful not to cover the whole thing. Giving an impression of trees behind and bits and pieces of greenery behind the main trees that are at the front. Going darker still in some areas. Keeping those trunks visible and keeping some spaces within the tree, which keeps it nice and light. You can see we're painting these foliage. It's really just a case of using very decisive strokes and not fiddling about too much. And remembering to leave lots of gaps, which should be where your birds fly through. Yeah, I wanted that tree by the church to be particularly dark. That's heavy shadow there. And some dark shadows where the hedge would be. So that would be in shadow from the trees just behind it. Going to darken the walls of the church using the earth colours, raw sienna, burnt sienna, just varying it a little bit. Keeping the window clear. And this porch, which leads into the side of the church. The main entrance is at the around the opposite wall to the back of it. But I think there's quite a nice feature. So putting the timbers in quite dark, and there is a gate here. Which would be a nice way of leading your eye into the painting, taking you into where the chapel is, the centre of interest. And now putting the dark on the right hand side of these trunks. Using a smaller round. This one's a synthetic, so it's quite a nice fine point, which I'll put the beginnings of some of the branches in with. Then I'll be finishing them off with the rigger brush. Once again, that's dried off. Putting in these 4 panes of glass on the back of the church. Try not to overdo it with too many branches. And being mindful of the way trees grow and the way branches grow. Try not to make the branches too straight. This is using the rigger brush, which is an excellent brush for doing these fine branches. Just have to make sure that you load it with lots of paint. And then you can do the entire branch more or less in one go. Just deciding where these real darks are going to go in. This is Hooker's Green and Payne's Grey. Just putting some more on this tree that's at the side of the church. This is a very watery wash of lavender, which will dry quite a bit lighter, but it's going to be covered with the dappled shadow from the trees to the left hand side. Trying to be mindful not to overdo it with these darks on the trees. And giving the impression of some grasses now, which is going to be various earth colours, greens, Hooker's Green, raw sienna, burnt sienna, raw umber, and some light red. So you've got some darks and some warm colours in the foreground. Once again, it's restraint with this. Just giving the impression and letting the viewers interpret it as what it is. Working quite quickly with this, which helps me to not fuss too much. Keeping the main part of the foreground, which is the light field leading towards these grasses, leaving that fairly much untouched. So look, it does look quite nice and bright. And then putting the edges of the path, put that in with just a little water to soften the edges. So you've got hard and soft edges. and some indication of things on the pathway leading towards the gate. But keeping that fairly much untouched, and they will dry quite a bit lighter. Now I'm going to be doing some spatter, which is putting paint, watery paint, on the brush. In this instance it's raw umber and neutral tint. Putting quite a lot on the brush and just tapping it against another brush to get some flecks. I cover the painting up because it can fly all over the place. Try not to tap too hard. Best to practice on some practice paper first. Now my favourite part, which is putting in the shadow, alizarin crimson, cobalt blue. Just be mindful to keep it fairly watery and just go over it once. And when that dries, that'll dry quite nicely, looking like the shadow off of the trees and the buildings from the sun. It does bring the painting to life. And using the same mixture on parts of the trunk. Just looking at the picture, the painting overall, and putting in some darks here and there. I quite often look at my paintings a day or two after, maybe leave them hanging on the wall, and then doing some adjustments if they need it. Now taking off the tape, which is just regular masking tape. If it's put on just before you do the painting and not left overnight, it should come off quite easily without taking any paper with it. And there's the completed piece. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, which will help me to make more of these paintings for you.